Joe Biden breaking news: Biden is still a political albatross. President Joe Biden's major political comeback looks like a dead stone throw. The average is still around 42%. This represents a transition from catastrophic to simply miserable. Better than the alternative, but not enough to change the Democratic midterm elections. An overly optimistic assumption early in his presidency was that he could be another FDR or LBJ. This summer's overly optimistic attitude was that he might be pretty good at it. In reality, he is persistently unpopular and a great responsibility to his party. Few obvious benefits. And despite his protests, he may end up declaring he won't run for re-election in about a year. Despite widespread skepticism, his achievements in snatching his party's nomination in 2020 allowed him to still be associated with major voters. But as the only major party presidential candidate not to nominate Donald Trump, he ultimately won the presidency by default. Pete Buttigieg. Normally a president needs 50% or more approval to significantly cut losses over the medium term, and the latest ABC News Washington Post poll puts presidents under 40 at 39%. Polls, but more recent polls show successive presidential endorsements at 40 or 41. He is devastated by the issue that every poll shows is the most important to Americans: the economy. A Politico Morning Consult poll found he agreed between 35% and 61% on his handling of the economy, and an ABC Washington Post poll found that people trusted Republicans on the issue, 16 points more than he did. Indicates that the Democrats' slight lead in the popular vote is not for him, despite their feelings for Biden. Even if he was elected president in 2020, he would have had to deal with price pressures and supply chain disruptions. Do not have. His strategy on inflation is hoping it will cool down before the midterm elections, and, as they say, hope is not a strategy. If he was lucky, inflation would have come down, and if by reasonable standards it's not really inflationary, think that he's trending favorably thanks to the Democrats' anti-inflation bill. Could have done. In fact, except for the title, there is nothing different than when inflation he is 2%. This reflects long-standing progressive priorities in the areas of climate, healthcare and taxation. Biden could have acknowledged inflation concerns early and curtailed spending with the first COVID-19 bill. Once inflation became undeniable, we could have acknowledged the reality of inflation and adjusted our further spending ambition accordingly. He could adopt a bipartisan agenda to boost the supply side of the economy through deregulation, elimination of tariffs and increased energy production. He claimed inflation was temporary and could no longer do it, declaring that we had turned a corner in a hurry when we weren't. Now the Federal Reserve has no choice but to slow down the demand side of the economy and risk a recession that Biden officials say will of course not come. Biden benefited from the momentum over the summer. He passed major Democratic initiatives or acted through the executive branch. Getting things done is usually better than its opposite, but there was a limit to how much that activity could get him. Not a thing. Nearly 60% of people don't think this will reduce or increase inflation, according to the Morning Consult. The draft drug price reduction provisions are very popular, but they are too small to go into effect immediately. Green energy incentives are also good, but they don't compare to the impact of higher gas prices. Biden's student debt relief is now a smart grassroots policy. As Nate Silver pointed out at the time, it's aimed at a very Democratic constituency: young, middle-class college grad students. However, its appeal is limited. A recent NBC poll of him found that attitudes toward the move were largely divided based on whether he had student loans. For a while it looked like the abortion issue could radically change the course of the midterm struggle, but it doesn't seem enough to put the House in the hands of Democrats. Despite this, we have done everything we can to strengthen Trump. The Republican is incredibly tall for a former president, but he didn't participate in the voting himself, and despite his ability to dominate the stage, he can't outrun the economy. For his part, Biden is not the dominant figure. With his Obama-like charisma, he holds no one to himself. He impresses no one with boundless energy like Teddy Roosevelt. A triangle like Clinton. In surveying, he does not convince bystanders. He doesn't belittle the opposition with his Reaganish humor. He was a mostly straight partisan Democrat president with no particular talent or charm, and no one blamed him when he was killed in Florida by Republican Governor Ron. His life. Mr. Biden is fast approaching quasi-lame duck status. Everyone knows he will soon be 80 and we see it in his work. ABC News and Washington Post polls show that only 35% of Democrats and pro-democracy independents believe they have nothing against Biden and wish him the best of luck. Hopes to run for a second term. Clearly not expecting a great second act from the proverbial dead cat.